Have you ever tried yellow tea? It's a very rare tea that's only produced by a few tea makers in China. Well, today we're going to learn a little bit more about this unique but delightful tea. I hope you can join us. Hello, tea lovers. Welcome to Rebecca's Tea Cozy, where we share a love of tea and other things that are cozy to nourish our bodies and our souls. In this series of Let's Talk Tea, we're looking at the 6 categories of tea and what makes each of them unique. We've learned that all of true teas come from the Camellia sinensis plant, and it's the level of oxidation that each tea is allowed to go through that determines whether it's going to be a green tea or a white tea or a black tea or others in between. Today, we're going to learn about the rarest tea that comes from China, which is a yellow tea. Yellow teas date back to at least the 16th century, and some say even further than that. Yellow tea is believed to have been discovered by actually a faulty green tea process. Some believe that in trying to make green tea and then forgetting about it, that yellow tea was actually discovered by accident. But in making yellow tea, they also found that it was a very enjoyable drink. And because of its sweet taste and delicate flavor, it actually became known as a tea that was served for imperials or emperors. So this tea is now enjoyed by those who are fortunate enough to know about it and able to obtain it from a source. As tea producers try to make this tea now, it is a very intentional process, but also one that is very time consuming. The method to create yellow tea was actually lost for a very long time and then was rediscovered in the 1970s and has not taken off fully because of the process that it takes to go through, but there are still some tea makers who are dedicated to reviving this lost tea and continuing to produce it for tea consumers. Since this tea is so time intensive, it is still considered a very unique tea that is known as a gift-giving tea or reserved for those that you want to treat in a special way. It can be fairly expensive because it's only produced by a few tea makers and it's only made in small batches. So it is difficult to find and mass market at a large scale. But that's also what makes it very special and just an enjoyable tea to drink because as you're consuming this beverage, you know that it is something rare and unique that you're partaking in. So yellow tea, as we've said, does involve a time-intensive process. It's very similar to the beginning stages of green tea, and so let's talk about that process now. Before we begin the actual process, we can look at yellow tea. Now, what I've done is compared it to a green tea so that you can see the differences between yellow and green. And I wanted to make sure that we do that because there are a lot of teas that are considered yellow teas, but they actually are green teas. They haven't gone through the process that makes a yellow tea truly in the category of yellow tea. So you have to be careful that you're not drinking an impostered yellow tea that's just a green tea named that because of the color of the brew or because maybe the leaves themselves look yellow. So that's why we're going to talk today about the actual process of what makes a true yellow tea. But since it's similar to green tea and there are some green tea imposters, I wanted to compare the two so you can see the distinct difference. So this tea right here is a green tea. It's Misty New Top. While this tea in this corner is our yellow tea today, which is the Mogan Yellowbud tea. And there are only about 3 to 4 yellow teas that are actually produced. So there's not like there's tons of varieties like we've seen with green teas or we will see with black teas. When you compare these, And I know, again, it's difficult to see on camera, so I'll provide a close-up shot. But you will notice that the yellow tea does have a little bit browner of a look. It's gone through a very slight oxidation process, not the traditional oxidation process that an oolong or that a black tea will go through, as we'll be discussing, but it goes through a slight oxidation process, and so it has a little bit browner leaves. Whereas this tea up here, that's the green tea, is a little more dark, intense green tea. Let's talk now about the process of what makes these two teas distinct and what makes yellow tea truly become yellow. Before me are the stages of tea, which we should be pretty familiar with now, and let's review what the stage of green tea is. First, all teas are plucked, and again, the quality of your tea is going to depend on the fineness and intentionality of plucking. So because yellow teas are a very treasured, prized, and rare tea, they are going to be one of the finer plucked teas. There may be a very slight withering stage, but green tea typically won't go through a withering stage, or if it does, it will go through a very brief withering stage. But what makes green tea green, remember, is that it's fired right away to halt that enzyme, which will activate with the oxygen in the air, causing oxidation or turning those leaves brown. So remember, green tea goes pretty much from plucking to firing to deactivate that enzyme, which keeps it green. After firing, the green tea leaves are rolled or flattened, and then they are dried and then packaged for consumers. So when we talk about yellow tea is plucked, it's fired right away, also to halt that oxidation process, and then it's rolled. But after rolling and before it goes to the drying and packing stage, there's what's called a smothering stage. And this is the key to yellow tea that makes it intensive. So with yellow tea, it's typically pan fired, and it's started at maybe a little lower temperature and brought up to a more intense heat. Then, when it's finished firing, it's placed in baskets or it's placed in cloth, rolled up and put in a box. So it's stored, it's covered and stored, and it's allowed to be smothered, so to speak. So it's kept in that warm, moist environment in a large heap of leaves. And then every so often, depending on the tea maker, it may be over a period of hours, or it may actually be over a period of several days. It's then brought back to the fire, reheated, covered back again, and allowed to sit. Then it will be reheated, brought up to temperature again, covered back up, and allowed to sit. So because it's heaped together and covered and smothered, it creates that yellowing or very slight oxidation process. Not an enzymatic oxidation process like the other tea leaves are, where it's turning brown in response to the oxygen in the air, but a different type of oxidation process. And then once it's at the stage where the tea maker feels that it's ready, then the tea will be dried, typically roasted or baked, and then it will be packaged and sent to consumers to enjoy. So this is a stage that yellow tea is the only stage that has gone through this process, and that's what makes it unique. Now, in going through the smothering stage, what they found is that it removes the grassiness that we often come to associate with green teas, and it also brings out a little sweeter, less bitter or astringent flavor to the tea, and just makes it a little more delicate and enjoyable to drink. So, yellow tea truly is a prized tea, whether you're an emperor or whether you're just an average Joe tea drinker who wants something special. So now, the favorite part of the tea episode, which is the tea tasting. So I'm going to make a cup of green tea so that we can test the leaves and the brew and compare to a cup of yellow tea. So I'm heating the water right now, and I will steep the tea and be back with you in just a few minutes. I just finished brewing our yellow tea and our green tea, and now it's time to put it to the test. So, when brewing yellow tea, because it is a similar process to green tea, you brew it about the same way. So, the temperature recommended is around 165 degrees Fahrenheit to about 185 degrees Fahrenheit, or 75 to 85 degrees Celsius. And depending on which brewing style you're using, whether you're using more leaf and less water, or more water and less leaf, will depend on your steeping time. Again, the less tea to water ratio that you have, the longer your steeping time will be. When we initially compare the yellow tea and green tea leaves, that's where you can really see in the steeped leaves the difference between the yellowed tea and the green tea. The green tea definitely still has a greenish color to it, whereas the yellow tea looks dull and, well, yellowed a little bit. In the actual color of the brew, you'll notice that there is a similar color, and the one on the right is the green tea, the one on the left is the yellow tea. So they're similar, but the one on the right, the green tea, is actually a little darker and a little more amber hued than the delicate yellow flavor that a yellow tea produces. Now, in comparing the yellow tea and the green tea together, I made sure to use a Chinese green tea because yellow tea is only produced in China. And so I wanted a Chinese green tea to compare. Remember when we talked about Japanese green teas, we shared how bright the green brew is compared to Chinese teas, and that's because the Japanese use a steaming process to deactivate the enzyme, whereas the Chinese typically use a pan firing process to deactivate that enzyme. So with the green tea, it doesn't take on a bright green appearance typically in a Chinese green tea. It's more of a pale yellow or amber, almost to a pale brown hue. And so it's not a significant distinction, but you can tell when you put a yellow tea side by side with the green tea, the difference in that color. So now let's smell the leaves for the aroma. So the green tea smells earthy and a little vegetal. And it does have a sweet flavor coming out of it. And I picked a green tea that has a little bit of a sweeter profile. Just very spring scents. The yellow tea aroma, it has a really sweet floral smell to it. It's definitely more floral than that vegetal or what we would term grassy smell to it. And of course, the sweetness, almost like honeysuckle, is kind of what it's reminding me of right now. And so now the taste. Let's start with the green tea. It has a mild flavor, a little bit of astringency, just a tiny bit, and definitely more of a grassy, but a clean grassy taste to it. Again, kind of like spring, something that when you go outside and you smell the scent of fresh cut grass, it's a grassy, earthy smell, but yet it smells clean and refreshing at the same time. I think sometimes I always worry about calling green tea a grassy flavor that it's going to turn people off when we think about maybe like chewing on hay or something like that. It really is a nice, delicate, fresh, clean flavor. And now the yellow tea. Definitely a sweeter, richer taste to it. There's no bitterness or astringency, and that grassy flavor that's typically present in green teas doesn't exist in this tea right now. The other thing that's unique about yellow teas is they'll say that this process creates a silkier, smoother tea. And I have to say that you pretty much have to taste it for yourself to understand what that means. When I'm drinking this, it's a little bit drier to the mouth, whereas when I'm drinking the yellow tea, it does create that silkiness on the tongue and that smoothness, which helps contribute again to that sweeter, softer, more delicate flavor. A true delightful experience for your tea time. Now, we've talked about the comparison between tea bags and loose leaf tea, and because of the rarity of yellow tea, you are definitely going to find this only in loose leaf tea varieties. Another reason to switch to loose leaf so you can explore a variety of interesting and exciting teas. Now, the last thing we're going to talk about are the health benefits. So, as we've shared, green tea is known to have many health benefits, primarily due to the antioxidants that are present in the tea. And we learned that white tea is sometimes known as even having more health benefits than green tea. Well, yellow tea is also known to have even higher benefits than green tea. And again, it's a study suggests or a few studies suggest. However, we do know that there is benefit in drinking tea, and yellow tea in a study showed that it did have higher antioxidants than the green tea did. So there is some evidence that it may be slightly healthier. The other thing that is claimed is that yellow tea, because of the process that it undergoes through the smothering process and the yellowing process, is that it actually creates a more gentle tea for the stomach. So, another benefit of drinking yellow tea over green tea. Again, because of the rarity of yellow tea and the expense of yellow tea, it's not a tea that most of us are going to enjoy on a daily basis as part of our typical tea time routine. But it is one that I would definitely recommend that you add to your collection to enjoy either by yourself in a really special time or perhaps treasured with a friend over tea time. I will share a few links of yellow teas that I have come across and encourage you to step out and try something new. If you have tried yellow tea before, if you would be willing to share a comment below of what your experience of drinking yellow tea is, or if you haven't tried yellow tea, what's the most interesting tea or rare tea that you have tried? I'd love to hear from you and share with our tea community. So, hopefully, you've gained a little bit more knowledge about tea through today's episode. We'll be back again next week as we explore the next category of tea, which is oolong teas. So, I look forward to our standing reservation right here at Rebecca's Tea Cozy. Until then, be blessed with a cup of tea.